Hello, hi everyone. This is Cindric Steptoe, Director of the Career Lab. So 5:30, probably wait about 2 more minutes, let a couple more people sign on before we go ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me that signed on right now? Just put an OK in the chat box if you can hear me. Great. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Being respectful of everyone's time. Definitely thank you for being here this evening. First of all, welcome Wildcats. Thank you for joining us. This is hosted by the U of A Alumni Career and Professional Development Lab. I'm the director, Cindric Steptoe. I'm broadcasting live from the beautiful UA campus here in Tucson, Arizona. Fortunately, we've been dealing with some cold weather the past couple of days, but hopefully that'll pass. We'll get back to this nice springtime weather. I'm excited about tonight's webinar, Career Management. Are you about the journey or the destination? Presented by Robert Weber. We all have career goals, but whether you focus on the destination or the journey to reaching those goals can influence career tactics and strategies. This webinar will provide several frameworks for managing these difficult career choices. By the end of this presentation, you will have a set of tools to help you assess your approach to career management, a better understanding of what you want from your career, and more resources that you can use for further personal exploration. This webinar is a part of a free alumni career webinar series from the Alumni Career Lab that provides monthly conversations with experts about a variety of industry and professional development topics. Today's presentation is being recorded and it will be archived on the Alumni Association website for you to access on demand. Find a link to that and more at alumnicareerlab.com. Questions are welcome anytime during tonight's event. Type them into the chat box on the right side of your screen whenever you think of them. Rob will answer questions at the end of the webinar. If you're on Twitter tonight, tweet at us about this webinar or other career topics using the hashtag HireAtCat. We love to hear from you. Now, a little bit about Rob. Rob is the Vice President of Human Resources for Sears Holding Corporation, where he is responsible for developing and leading the talent agenda for approximately 100,000 employees across the U.S., India, and Hong Kong. He has presented to HR professionals and other groups on a variety of topics ranging from performance management and leadership models to effectively using data in HR. Rob studied economics and humanities at the University of Arizona, where he was a splat cat on the U of A racquetball team before moving to Colorado to ski and live on a ranch. He presently resides in Illinois with his wife and two children. Huge thanks to Rob tonight for taking the time to be with us and share with his expertise. Now I'll turn things over to Rob, who will tell you a little bit more about himself and walk you through his presentation. Rob, on to you.
Great. Thank you, Cindric. Appreciate it. Just real quick, want to make sure everyone can hear me. If you can hit OK again into the chat box, make sure we're good. Great. Okay. So thank you. Bear down, everybody. Glad you're here. And Cindric, thank you for the opportunity to share my story today with our fellow Wildcats. The picture you see on this slide is here for a reason. You may wonder, why do I have a picture of a Cadillac on a dirt road when we're talking about career? And the reason I want to start here is to tell you the story of the people who were in that car, the place we were going. And if you look at that picture, you see we're about to hit a puddle. So that is a brand new Cadillac that we rented to take a road trip the year I graduated from the U of A in 1991. And this was in the following spring. The people in that car would become a pediatric neurosurgeon, an anesthesiologist. One of the guys had already been the president of the University of Arizona Student Association. And apparently I had gas money and was available to go on the trip, so they made room for me. But the reason I put this here is if you think about a road trip, when you go on a road trip, are you going because you're trying to get to the destination? You can't see it here, but we had a bumper sticker that said New Orleans or bust. But the real piece of that road trip was about the journey. We went to New Orleans from Tucson. The quickest way is along Interstate 10, but we went through LBJ's ranch. We went to South Padre Island at the very tip down in Brownsville, Texas. Cindric, being from Texas, will know that's not on the way to New Orleans, not at all. But that trip was both about the journey and about the destination. So I used that to set up this presentation and tell you a little bit about it. The lyrics from this song, it's a Sawyer Brown song called I'll Take the Dirt Road. It's basically spelling out that everything you need in life you can find on the dirt road. You don't have to have a certain level or class of service and everything you're looking for. But don't watch the video. It did not age well. What I want to share with you today speaks a little bit more about how might you think about managing your career. Are you on a journey or are you trying to get to a destination? So what this session is about is giving you a primer to think about what you want and why you want it. And it's going to focus primarily around culture and context and your own aspirations. And it's also a chance to consider a different approach than what you might have classically been given. What the session is not about is it's not trying to be a step-by-step guide to conducting a job search. It's really not meant to sway you toward one path or another. It's really just kind of setting up how you might think about things. And it's also not an exhaustive list of resources, but I'll provide a few, and I'm happy to connect with anybody who might be interested in learning more. In the very last page, I can give you some resources about ways you might utilize tools to do this. So Cindric introduced me, but this is a slide I use internally and with industry associations to kind of tell my story. So as I mentioned, or as Cindric mentioned, I'm the VP of Human Resources here at Sears Holdings. We own Sears and Kmart, as well as the Shop Your Way ecosystem of companies. But I started my journey, if you will, at the University of Arizona, where I graduated with a degree in economics. The company lists you see here are varied across semiconductor, things like financial services, tech companies, Western Union, First Data, PepsiCo, consumer packaged goods. I went into e-commerce and in Sears Holdings. And the small blurbs to the right of each title tell you a little bit about what I got out of those experiences and what those companies were about. If you see the Arizona logo here, while I was a student at the University of Arizona, this thing was unveiled during those years, and we were all appalled to find out that the university had spent $16,000 to commission a company to design that for them. I think any one of us on this webinar today could probably jump into a free software system and design that very same thing today at little or no cost in only a few minutes. But back then, that was highly controversial of what it cost and how they went about doing it. What I show you these things for is to say, some of these companies you may have never heard of. Some obviously you have, but others like LSI, unless you are a technology person and are tracking the innards of a computer system, you may not even know what they are, and they make small computer system interface pieces. This L4E is sort of my life motto. It stands for live, laugh, love, learn, and execute. And the quote I use to express this is, you can't build a reputation based on what you're going to do, from Henry Ford. My point of including this here is to say, while this is about the context of career management, if you don't understand who you are and what you're about, managing a career in a static environment doesn't really work well. You have to always do it in the context of who you are and what you want to do, be, and become. And so this little logo is what I've used as I sort of express that behind the message in my life. So just to give a little bit more perspective, and then I'll kind of jump into pieces. This is an analogy called the 5 juggling balls of life, right? If you think of these as the 5 areas that a lot of people spend their time thinking about balancing or dealing with, 4 of them, health, family, friends, and spirit. That may be religion to some people. That may be meditation to others. These are things that feel a little more personal. And then the one in red here is work. what I would tell you as we set this up and give you the context is only that red ball here, work, is made of rubber. And if you drop it, it'll bounce back. You can pick it up, use it again, and sort of rebuild. But the others, think of them as made of glass. If you drop them, they'll be scuffed, scratched, cracked, and maybe even shattered. And so as you think about how you balance your life and what you prioritize, what I would ask you to think about is work is important. Don't get me wrong. My message is not to de-emphasize work and say it shouldn't matter to you. But if you damage your health or your sense of spirit, family, or friends, those things are really, really difficult to repair and may not be something you can replace. But work, we can find ways to launch a new career, take a new job, do some other things. So all of these matter, but obviously this is about career management. So a lot of what you're seeing now, I'm going to try to emphasize around the context of managing your career. So how might you think about your career? I mentioned journey or destination. This is a quote from a book. A path is but a path. You have to decide whether there's virtue in staying on it or moving away from it. That's from a book called The Teachings of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda. So this sort of speaks to the notion that you can walk a path, and again, you have to determine where that's going to take you, what it's going to mean. And I'll ask you this question. So there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on. Does anyone recognize that? And if you do, tell me where you think that's from. Put it in the chat box if you know it. All right, we don't have any music fans maybe of the right age, but that is from Stairway to Heaven from Led Zeppelin. So that's a classic line in that. Again, the example here is you can think about how you want to manage this. It doesn't mean that you have to stay on the path you're on. And finally, regardless of the path you're taking, you can find inspiration anywhere. So I came across this quote: "A solid challenge will bring forth your finest abilities." And you probably don't recognize that because that was my Panda Express fortune cookie from a couple of months ago. So it's kind of dumb and silly, but the reality is I actually think it's a great quote, because when we find ourselves challenged, when you don't know how to do something or what to do, that's when you have to push hard to come out of something with a better resolution and answer than what you might have thought yourself possible in doing. So as I mentioned, are you driven by the journey or the destination? I think you've seen from what I've put up thus far that I'm probably a journey-driven person, and I would tell you I absolutely am. This doesn't mean I don't have career objectives or goals specifically, but the way I manage against that is different than somebody who would be driven by the destination. So how does that look to other people? If you are driven by the journey, you may think of career goals as about a 30,000-foot view of the route. It serves as a general guide of where you're trying to get to. That may be the vice president of a division. It may be CEO of your own company. Could be a number of things. If you're destination driven, what you're really looking for is a map that's going to give you turn-by-turn navigation to your dream job. It may be the same career goal of CEO or VP, but how we get there will look different based on whether you tend to be driven by the journey or the destination. How you might think about lateral moves. A journey-driven person might generally think, hey, they'll embrace that if there's an opportunity to expand skills or explore interests. A destination-driven person may only embrace that if the opportunity represents what they view as a necessary step or clearly builds a capability required on your specific path. Would you change jobs? Well, does that focus on the experience rather than the position? Meaning, is this something that is of interest to you that you feel would add to your capability? Or again, is this focus on the position with regard to advancement if you're driven by that destination? And then finally, whether you would change companies or even industries, right? Professions. Journey-driven person may look at that as an opportunity that would make them excited to expand their horizons, while a destination-driven person might say, well, I'll consider that if and only if a move advances me along that desired path. So when you're walking through these things, you really have to understand a concept that I learned in economics while I was at University of Arizona, and that is the sunk cost fallacy. What the sunk cost fallacy really expresses is that we can sometimes become irrationally invested in a prior decision when you've committed substantial time and energy to a previous choice. So I started out my career studying economics. I started in semiconductor along a production program and ran night shift, and then ultimately was in this possibility where I could grow through an operations standpoint. I spent 5 years doing that kind of work, but then I shifted into a different line of work in human resources. Some people may look at that and say, wow, you had to start over, but that's not how I would view that. The sunk cost fallacy says that is all done and behind you. And just because you've invested a lot of time and energy into something doesn't mean it's a good decision to continue with it. So how do you overcome that? You have to think about accurate data, define what success would look like for you before you start. You have to develop multiple options and consider the decision from an outsider's reference point. So there's ways that you can avoid traps. I did that 5 years into my career. I've met and talked to people who didn't do it until 30 or 25 years into career. And so the reason I spend so much time talking about what you really want and what works for you is because the last thing you want to do, whether you're a year out of school or 20 years out, is continue down a path that makes you miserable. Just as individuals are driven by either the journey or the destination, companies are sort of set up in a way that might lend themselves to one path or another. So this is an example from my days at PepsiCo, which is absolutely a destination-driven culture. If you look at this, this lays out basically 5 different career paths. And what I would walk you through is the bottling network and what it looks like to drive toward a vice president, general manager of a market unit. And really what we would put people through the paces as I recruited individuals to these jobs was that I can tell you the 8 jobs that you would have over a 10 to 12 year period in order to get to the level where we would consider you for a market director and then a VP GM job. So it's very clearly laid out. The path is very structured and obvious. There's reasons you take certain jobs to learn things. Within Pepsi, we're looking for a high share market, a low share market. Are you in a unionized labor market, in a non-union market? Are you in a Pepsi share where there's more Pepsi sold than Coke? Or are you in a Coke dominant market where you're having to overcome some things? All of these give you different elements toward that one destination career. We did it for VPGM. We did it for plant director from a bottling standpoint. So this is an example of what a destination culture would look like. I left PepsiCo to go to Groupon. Groupon is the antithesis of a destination-driven organization. One, it's only about 8 years old, and at this point it's now 9. They don't have the technical debt of decades and decades of things built up. And they also don't have the infrastructure to drive toward very clearly defined outcomes. But they don't want those things. And so what you have to understand in a journey-driven culture such as Groupon is that there's not going to be a clear path for you to follow to build your career. There's a lot of things you can accomplish. And the beauty of a culture like Groupon's is that we would create staff and disband roles to build and run a business within months. And at PepsiCo, it would take a 2-year survey before you would decide to even get into a business. There's no firmly established career path for growth, but if you can dream up an idea for work to be done and it's a challenge that the team there thinks could be useful, they will absolutely support people to do it. So if you can think it, you can work on it. And it's just a very different cultural element. So thinking about your own preference for how you tend to make your decisions, thinking about how a company is set up is an important element in driving your career. Which one is better? I couldn't tell you. You have to learn and know that for yourself, but it is important to understand how companies think and operate as well as how you tend to think and operate. The other side of the career search or career management element is how does a company generally make decisions about you? If you're trying to join a company, I mean, the first and most obvious thing is the interview and job performance, but they also consider feedback from candidates' previous employers. The world is a very small place. We all know each other and are connected to each other. The 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? And with LinkedIn, it's probably becoming fewer and fewer links between us to get everyone connected. But we can find information out about each other very quickly. And that goes for employers about each of us as well, not just us about the employer. They'll do culture fit assessments. I don't know if any of you have switched jobs recently, but we here at Sears Holdings, we will do a culture fit assessment because while a lot of people have the marketing capability to do the jobs that we need done here, not everybody has the fortitude, resilience, and character to be able to do it in a turnaround situation with its high risk and involves a lot of elements of transformative characteristics. So you may be a great marketer, but in our context, that might not be the right fit. Companies are going to do that testing you, and you may notice it in a formal assessment you're asked to complete either online or live through an interview, or you may feel questions being asked about that. You need to be doing the same about a company. And so there's a lot of research you have to do. Organizational needs for skills. You may be a great fit for the culture, but you might not be what they need at the moment. They're also looking for wisdom of the crowd, right? Social media absolutely tells a story about each of us. And so recognizing if, as you leave campus, what you choose to put in social media is probably not what you want long term from a professional standpoint. I see Shun Lowe is on here. Shun and I played on that racquetball team together. What I would say is we probably had the good fortune of finding that a lot of our stuff was never documented and posted to social media the way a lot of those things happen today. So, and the last thing I'd have you think about is a candidate's previous experiences, right? So, what have you done? How might you represent what your story is about? So, I showed you the slide because that's what I use to tell my story. I don't tell the story about me the way you would about you, but this gives you a few ideas of how different ways to think about it are. So, how do you thrive versus just survive at a new opportunity? So, this picture here is the confluence of the Colorado and the Green Rivers. This is outside of Moab, Utah, and then it flows down into the Grand Canyon. But what I'd call your attention to in this picture is that as the two rivers meet, one is a very much different color than the other, and the tributaries come together. What you can't see is it comes down here, it blends over time. So as you take a new opportunity, think of this as the analogy. You will find that as you come to a new opportunity, that may be a new company, or it may simply be a new work assignment, or even a new job within your current company. Just as a river travels at a different speed, has different sediment content, may have run through different types of sedimentary rock, so it's colored differently, and the temperature may be different depending upon how quickly it came from its source, whether that source was mountainous glaciers or it was a spring underground. It takes a while for these things to mix, and so as you take on a new job, even if you were a superstar where you were before, it will take a while. In this picture, it's around the bend before you see these fully melding together. Think about that from the standpoint of any job or company or other change you may be thinking about, and recognize there's some time invested that you have to input in order to really make that work. So what I want to speak to next then is how do you make sure you're thriving instead of just surviving that kind of change? And to steal a line from Stephen Covey, he talks a lot about sharpening the blade. I've named that, if you will, to sharpen the knife. You have to know yourself. What is it you really want and need? You need to network. Nobody does great things completely alone. You have to invest in yourself. None of us are ever a finished product. We can always improve, do something better, gain a new skill, learn a new habit. You have to follow your bliss. And if you're a fan of Joseph Campbell, you'll know what I'm talking about, but we'll come to that and I'll talk about it. But let your life speak. Let it stand for something. And finally, sometimes you have to endure or endeavor to do something. Life happens, so you got to live it. There is never a perfect time to get married. There's never a perfect time to add to or start a family. There's never a perfect time to, retire until you hit a magic number. Life happens. You don't always get to control it, so you have to endure some things. This is the first tool I'd point you toward of, okay, that's great, Rob. So how do I better know myself? So this is sort of a decision matrix that I would point you toward. And on the axis you see on the left, I've said this is something that if it is to the left of the center line, that I would say I'm not good at. And on the right, I would say I'm good at something. And then in the vertical is I enjoy that activity or I don't enjoy that activity. So in this case, I've said, if this were thinking about a job that I've been presented, I've interviewed, do I want to accept it or not? I would think about the activities needed to do that job effectively. And then I would assess, based on my own observations, what people have told me, what I know about myself, do I enjoy that work? If I did, it would be on this side of the line. To what extent do I really like that? If I didn't, it would be on the left side. And if I was good at it, it would be on the right. If it was not, it would be on the left. And if I enjoy it, it'd be high. If I didn't, it would be low. Well, what you're looking for is for every element of a job, analytical detail, process driven, requirements for time bound activity. If I find that a lot of the elements of a job land up in this upper right quadrant, then I'd say you nailed it. That's where you want to be as you are considering a new role, an assignment, an opportunity. Sometimes, though, you'll find a lot of things end up in the upper left. So you enjoy the work, but you don't necessarily have a great capability at it today. This is an opportunity to move from left to right and build skills. So you like it, you're happy to take it on. You may not have great depth there, but you can increase your capability as a professional by taking on those assignments or that job and improve and hopefully move those things into the upper right. But when you come below the line to things you don't enjoy, if you are good at something but you don't enjoy it, I've labeled this the pit of misery. So to blatantly steal from the Bud commercial, you're not going to find any dilly-dilly here. It is just not a good place to be from the standpoint of, yes, you're good at it. So you may say, well, that's great, I can do it. But you will find that this is mind-numbing and it's really hard on your psyche over time because that's not where you want to be spending your time. But the worst place to be, potentially, is something you're just not good at and also don't enjoy. That will lead to a horrible outcome for you and your employer. And that is a place you want to avoid. So how do you build skills and how do you increase enjoyment? Well, what I would tell you is if you find a lot of things in your map as you plot out the characteristics of a job or a company, you can do this with skills in a job. You can do it with elements of a company's culture. It is much simpler to build capability than it is to manufacture enjoyment. So saying, hey, I can deal with these things is a very dangerous spot to put yourself. So I've built this with enjoyment and things I'm good at or not good at. You could do it with capability. Does it land you closer to your target role or profession if you are destination driven or on the journey? What degree of challenge is in a job? I know it cold or I've never done it. What are the financial rewards associated with something? How much security is there or risk? And how much ability to advance? And you can put these in this matrix any way you'd like and use it to help you make better decisions about what you're looking for, how you're trying to drive through it. So that's the first way you can think about better knowing your own situation. If you find that you are here, sometimes you'll take a role to build a skill. And sometimes you will come down to a job that puts you in this spot for a certain period of time because the company really needs you to do something you're good at. But you need to know going in that this is a dangerous potential spot for you and have a very clear understanding with your management or your boss about, hey, I'm willing to pitch in and take one for the team, but know the job's going to get more out of you than you're going to get out of it for a period of time. Be aware of these things, and that's how you can better manage it. Other ways you could know yourself better. These are psychometric tools that help you understand a little bit more about your preferences. It's important to understand these are not trying to assess your actual strengths. This is about not capability, but your preference. So this one on the left is my actual emergenetics profile. It's measuring my preferred thinking style. So the yellow represents conceptual thinking, and the red represents social. So what's the impact to people? Blue is analytics, and green is structure. What this says is I don't like to be bound by structure. If given my own devices, I will come across a number of things and think high-level conceptual. It does not say I don't know how to project manage. It does not say I don't know how to follow structure or process. What this is talking about is my preference for how, if I'm guiding my work myself, I will tend toward conceptual and social. Now, my boss is very heavy green and blue. So she's very high on analytics and high on structure. So when I go in to talk to my boss, I know my tendency is to be very high level and talk about how it's impacting the team. She wants to know the project details and the plan and other things. So I have intentionally chosen jobs across my career to build capability in project management. Strength finders is another way you may think about this. Myers-Briggs type indicator, I happen to be ENFP, so that's a personality type. That's not good or bad. My profile in emergenetics, not good or bad. It is simply helping me understand what my tendencies and preferences are so that I come into understanding how I'm relating to other people at work. I can better manage those situations. Key takeaway, it's preferences, not capability. So the N stands for network. And here's a few tips for building and maintaining your network. What I said initially was nobody does anything really worthwhile without the help of others. And this is where your network comes into place. The key here is when you go to connect, you need to show sincere interest about wanting to connect with someone. If you leave the generic message from LinkedIn that says, I'd like to add you to my professional network on LinkedIn, and you don't know the person, expect that to be ignored. Some people will accept it, but I have found that if people don't reach out to me with anything more and I don't recognize their name, I'm highly unlikely to accept that invitation without a little bit of context and a personalized message. Take 30 seconds to write it out. So an example was I happened to be perusing LinkedIn a couple of months ago. I came across the announcement that Cindric had been hired to this position. I sent him a personalized note saying, Cindric, I see you were just promoted. Congratulations. I'm also a Wildcat. Would love to connect with you and also add you to my network. We then engaged in a couple of emails, had some conversations, and ultimately it led to me sharing my background of what I've done, and we decided this might be useful for other people to hear some of these strategies. So it wasn't generic. It was a reason we could both connect around, that we were Wildcats, and I expressed interest in what he was doing, and it gave him a reason to at least look at it. Reference things in common when you reach out and make people feel good that they talk to you. Look for ways that you can help others. If all you're doing is networking when you need help, you're not going to get a lot of help, right? If you want to reach out where you can provide help to others, you're far more likely to see them reciprocate down the road. So seek guidance and direction, not favors from people that you barely know. And sharing and posting articles on LinkedIn is actually the fastest way to build your following there. It's not to just click invitation to everybody you could possibly be connected to through work or school or some association. So make this genuine and then take some time to send an email or a phone call or engage in a chat with somebody that you've connected with. Don't just count your numbers and feel good because you have 1,500 people you barely know. Develop these relationships and care for them. And only provide appropriate disclosure when meeting somebody the first time. Remember, this is a professional networking site. It's not something where you're basically on Tinder or doing some other things. This is not Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook. Remember why you're using LinkedIn in particular to use it as a professional tool. I'll tell you one story from my own personal attempts, failed as it may be, from early in my career. When I moved to Colorado, as Cindric mentioned, I went up there somewhat jokingly to ski and live on a ranch. But I had the opportunity through family friends to be introduced to a guy who had spent 20 years living in Fort Collins, where I was moving. And they said, hey, call Brian. He'd be happy to see what he could do about connecting you with people. Well, I was 22, 23 years old. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with career. So when I finally did call him, I was basically an idiot and kept asking if he wanted to just go grab a beer. That was not a good way to engage in professional networking. Don't make my mistakes. You'll make your own, but don't do that if you are in that age bracket or stage of career. Think about this in a professional manner. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is now. This is an African proverb. It's apocryphal that it's that, but this is basically saying, don't build your network when you need it. Build your network when you can help others before you have a need, and that will serve you much better. And if you haven't really built out your network, even if you're not planning to do something where you're going to make a change, start now. And if it's you don't need anything, that's great. Maybe you can help other people figuring out what they need to do. So this is an example of a network map. LinkedIn, and there's a lot of online tools now that'll do this better for you. But this example comes from some work with a partner I used once. And the goal here is, who are the people I can list immediately in my network that I've worked directly with, who I have very clear connection points to? And who are they connected to? So on LinkedIn, this would be your first connection, your second connections of people that you're going to link to, that they are linked to. How do you bring these people into your network? That's kind of the key. You seek an introduction. You send an invite with, again, a few statements about why you are seeking to connect, what your connection point is if you don't already know them. Or you may have the opportunity to do this the old-fashioned way and meet somebody in person. So have your elevator pitch on who you are. I have the slide that I have built, but I know that story by heart because that's what my career has been. And I can speak to what I've tried to do as an HR professional based on my understanding where I've been and what I've done. The I in knife, invest in you. When you think about what you need to do to grow, you have to get out of your comfort zone. So this isn't the green spot of the bullseye. Where you want to be is actually the second ring. Your comfort zone is going to keep you safe. Sometimes it's better to be there, but if you're trying to grow, you have to get into the development zone and take some chances. There's always a price to be paid for something gained, and it's sometimes uncomfortable, but that's okay. What you have to be careful of is getting so far out of your comfort zone that you fall into the failure zone. And what you really need to know there is companies and bosses know they're stretching you and they don't want you to break, but there's no off switch in the typical job or company. You can subject yourself to burnout or failure or other things. And if you spin out of the failure zone or into it without speaking up, that's a disservice to everybody. So have a plan. I've referenced here The First 90 Days, which is a great book that is good either for a new job, new company, or a new assignment. It's just one you might think about. How do you plan that and deal with it? But if you get out to this failure zone, reach out, ask for a lifeline, go back to your boss, go back to your old mentor, somebody to help you get back into that stretch zone and keep from falling and spinning out. And then the F, follow your bliss. I have here Joseph Campbell's model for the hero's journey. So if anyone is familiar with his work, Joseph Campbell was very clear in his life and work saying, you have to follow your bliss and not be afraid. Do something that makes you happy, and you will find that opportunities will present themselves that you didn't think were going to be there. His concept from his book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, talks about this call to adventure. And if you use that analogy to think, hey, do I want to take a new job, assignment, change careers or companies? You're going from the known to the unknown. And in the unknown, in Joseph Campbell's world, in mythology, this is the underworld and dealing with demons and monsters and other things. But for you and I, it's a company I don't know. It's a job I've never done. And there are people who help the hero in his stories along the way go through the abyss and death and come back to the known world as you build capability and all of this. That thought, being willing to take a chance, you cannot gain without taking risks in life, is the thought I would ask you to take away if you take nothing else away from this presentation. But again, you have to determine how much are you willing to stretch, know what price you're willing to pay. There is no reward without risk, and you will always find that we are never a finished product. And if you are willing to take those risks, you'll be amazed how people will help you grow and to come to a feeling of comfort and another cycle completed, if you will. Finally, the E is for endure and endeavor. So the quote from Sheryl Sandberg, she is the COO at Facebook, right? I learned that when life pulls you under, you can kick against the bottom, break the surface, and breathe again. I don't think any of us have ever done anything where we haven't failed or fallen down at some point. But the trick to this is to get back up and give it another shot. And endure or endeavor, right? So in this, you may be dealing with life challenges, going through a divorce, having lost a family member or a job. Those are difficult things, but you have to endeavor or rather endure them and find a way to get back up on top. On the right, so how do you do that? So there's a lot of ways you think about that. And what I have here, one of them is endeavor, right? So I said, when I am stressed, I know I'm a stress eater. And if I don't watch it, that can really bring me down. My health suffers. I eat junk and chocolate. And I found that if I find a good physical challenge in my life, that I'm able to utilize that and balance it when I have to. Basically, that endeavoring gives me fulfillment that helps when I need to focus on work at the expense of those other facets of life. So the pictures on the right here are actually me and my son and his friend and buddy with the mascot from the Abominable Snow Race, which was completed earlier this month up in Wisconsin. It's a winter run and obstacle course. And I'm not a runner, but I said, I've got to push myself to try to do this. And this obstacle here is called the Weaver. So you go under, over these obstacles up and down the other side. To me, that challenging of yourself, finding something that I hadn't really done and pushing to do it was a way that helped me to overcome those things. And having that sense of accomplishment in another aspect of life has helped me sometimes push off the bottom when I've found difficulty with work. So Abdullah, hopefully that is one way. Another is go to a person who knows you and you trust. A lot of situations that I've had with work, I found I had a guy I supported and he really pushed hard. And I got to the point where I questioned my own competence, not even just my confidence. I went back to an old boss and we had a conversation about what I was dealing with. What he told me was, you need to step away from the content of what you guys are arguing about or what he's hammering you on, Rob, and adjust and think about the context. Why is he saying the things he's saying? And what it helped me realize is he said these things because they were about him and how he relates, not necessarily about me. So I rebuilt my confidence. I rebuilt my ability to challenge things, knowing that when he got passionate, that's who he was and what he was looking for. And I used that mentor, my old boss, to help me rebuild confidence and go back into a situation to deal with it when earlier in career I was struggling with that. So there's two ways that you might think about it: is another area of life where you have success, as well as somebody who knows and trusts you can help you see things you can't see. So I want to shift now and talk about aspirations for the next 10 minutes before we kind of open it up to other questions. What I would tell you in anything you're doing, as I've mentioned, is you have to dare to be great. If you want to accomplish anything worth doing, you have to take that risk. So how do you do that? Well, you have to dare to dream big. This is a picture of Jeff Bezos in 1999 when he started Amazon. So when you look at this and what he's got going on, would you have been an investor in Amazon in 1999 seeing that and seeing that setup? But when you think about what Jeff has accomplished and what he is continuing to do with Amazon, what it's become, he didn't do that because he had a small dream to reduce the price of books and fulfill them in a different way of brick and mortar versus online. He had this huge dream beyond just this notion of how to sell books in a cheaper way. That vision, that dream he carried with him is what gave him the vision and the mission to go and do the things that he's done. You have to dare to deliver, right? So I use the quote, you can't build a reputation on what you're going to do. You have to go and accomplish the things that you're trying to get done. So this is, if anyone's not familiar with this in the last couple of weeks, Nick Foles, who is the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, and they won the Super Bowl. He was named the Super Bowl MVP, and he happens to also be an Arizona Wildcat. Right after they won the Super Bowl, he's just won this game for his team in a battle with Tom Brady, who's largely considered the greatest quarterback of all time. And they interviewed him and they said, well, how did you do this? And he said, I think the thing that really helped me was knowing I didn't have to be Superman. I have amazing teammates, amazing coaches around me. So leadership isn't always about title, and it isn't always loud. Nick Foles led that team by going out and doing the things he knew how to do. The really interesting thing to me about Nick's story is that he almost quit football 2 years prior. He had bounced from one team to another. He'd had an early career success with Philadelphia, then was let go. He followed his old coach to another city. He left there. debated quitting when the coach of Philly approached him about coming on and joining the team. He was given an opportunity. He went out and he delivered. And nobody saw what he was able to do as what they would expect would happen. But sometimes you just have to dare to go do things nobody's seen you do before. And in this case, he did. And it's been incredibly uplifting to people who've known him or seen him do the things that he's done, and to sports fans, certainly. You have to dare to be different. This quote from Steve Jobs talks about, hey, life is short, okay? Your time's limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. Steve Jobs, as you know, founded Apple. He made a lot of people angry with him along the way, but he had that same type of vision and passion that we saw and see today in Jeff Bezos. Being different, doing something in a way that hasn't been thought before, is what separates people from the sort of tyranny of the crowd. Crowds in their nature sometimes will draw you to be pulled in, and society wants to bring you to the mean, not have highs and not have lows. But if you really want to achieve something great, you have to dare to be different and give a shot, take a risk, be that circle in the sea of triangles, and go for something that you think will differentiate you. In a career standpoint, that doesn't mean do accounting in a very creative ways. There's bounds by which you have to do it, because doing accounting creatively can land you in jail. But know that what you choose to do in terms of the ideas you draw from the data and other things, that's where your creativity can shine. And this dare to blow up or blow up. You can blow up in a good way and really be a success, or you can blow up and think the biggest failure you've ever experienced could be here. So in addition to playing racquetball at U of A, I also dabbled with the Comedy Corner, and they had a comedy contest there, and I blew up. And it wasn't in a good way. It was the most humiliating experience I could have imagined at that point in my life. But the sun came up the next day. I had my friends, I had my family, I had given it a shot, and it to this day resonates with me because it was an experience that said you can take risks, and sometimes you're going to blow up in a bad way, and other times you're going to be the hit of the party or other things from a comedy standpoint. But for me, that was what I was saying, is take risks. You know, the quote, life favors the bold. He's not the only one to ever say it, but Eric Lefkowski, who was a co-founder of Groupon where I worked, self-made billionaire. What I would tell you about Eric is he looks at himself, he says, I have never been the smartest guy in any room I've been in, but I've hustled and I've worked hard and I've been willing to take risks. And he leads, he's now the chairman and no longer CEO, but he founded Groupon with Andrew, and he built that company into an app that I would think comfortably most of you have and have used, or you're certainly aware of it. But life does favor the bold. Being meek and holding back is not always going to get you the things you want in life. So parting thoughts before I kind of turn it over to you for questions. Be persistent. Don't ever give up. Never give up. Don't ever give up. Jim Valvano, as he was dying of cancer, wanted people to understand that you have to always give your best effort and give it a shot. You own your own career, but never think you're alone. There are fans of yours out there, your family, your team, your boss. Sometimes you end up on different sides of an argument with them, but it's important to know there are people in your corner. And don't forget that, because we can easily draw into our own situation. Share your story. So let's connect. If I haven't met you, I'd be happy to spend a little bit of time talking further about my experiences or some of the tools that I've referenced here, but that may be useful to you. Or we can just talk through what you're dealing with and how you might think about dealing with it. And finally, live your best life ever. So this logo here takes me back to my first slide. I referenced that one of the passengers of that car became a pediatric neurosurgeon. Amazing guy. We lost him in 2012. He died in an accident. But if you ask Nate, no matter what he was doing, whether it was with family or work, how was your day? His answer was always, it was the best day ever. And he lived his life that way. And so when he died, his family put together the best life ever out of Flagstaff. And this is a program you can find online. And it is really intended that we're going to miss. Not every one of us is always going to deliver our best. But if we aspire to do that, we'll be so much happier, we'll be so much more fulfilled, and we'll be so much more successful when we're willing to take those chances and give it your genuine best to be your best you every day you can. Not every day you're going to make it. You're going to look in the mirror. If 2, 3 days in a row you're finding this isn't my best, step back, call that friend you haven't talked to in a while, reconnect, but give yourself the chance to live your best life ever. So with that, I would say bear down, and remember, you'll always be a wildcat. Reach out to another wildcat if you got nobody else in your community who can talk to you that day. So I want to turn it over to you. What questions can I answer for you? How can I help you as you think about your careers and things you'd like to accomplish?
Thank you, Rob, for that great presentation. Please, all viewers, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat box so Rob can answer them. I know I have one to kind of start it off for you, Rob. And
Go
my
ahead,
question
Sindri.
is, how much does your family factor into determining whether you're about the journey or the destination?
So my family is actually mixed in terms of our personality types. Um, and Abdullah will come to your question just in a moment. For me, family is everything. One of the pictures I didn't put in here because I wanted to have a little bit of economy is there's a picture of us all sitting around. There's two pictures. My life is about my family and what I can do for them to help them lead a full life. I don't want them to just be happy. I want them to understand that life is sometimes about struggle and it is sometimes about overcoming obstacles and doing things. If my only goal was to make them happy, I think I'm doing them a disservice. And my only goal is not to just give them a lot of money, but family for me is I've been forced onto a journey sometimes because of it. And I've chosen to make decisions about career because I needed to address things with my family. And I'll proudly tell you that I've done that and taken a second seat or a back seat rather with career choices occasionally because that was more important to me. Everybody's got to decide for themselves whether family should override a career opportunity because of a move. I'm no longer willing to physically relocate for at least the next couple of years until my kids are out of high school. That's one of the ways that family does come into the journey or the destination. I've had chances to do other things that I've turned down. With PepsiCo, I could have taken promotions, but I said, hey, I'm prioritizing that family. So it's a great question. We all have to answer it for ourselves.
Yep. Thank you.
Abdullah's question, so is it a mistake to step back a little if I feel paranoid? So I would tell you only you know the answer to that. Is it paranoia or anxiety? And so I'm not quite sure what you mean with paranoia, Abdullah. But what I'd say is think about why you're feeling the way you are. Is it discomfort with a capability? Is it discomfort with a preference? Use some of the tools, the chart that I drew out there, and I can get you a copy of it if that would be helpful to kind of chart out some of the things you're feeling and thinking about. And then you have to ask, so why might I make that decision to shift or step back? If it's because, hey, my family is ailing, my parents are now older, my dad can't get around the way he used to, and I need to take care of my family because of cultural or just family obligations that I feel, I think it's perfectly fine to slow down. Your career is not a sprint and it's not even a marathon. It's sort of a marathon in the form of a long distance sprint obstacle course. There's going to be times when you're running as fast as you can. And there are times when you come across an obstacle that you know how to do, but it's hard. And others when you've got to ask somebody how to get through, in my case, that weaver. Somebody had to tell me how to do it. But I figured out a way to do it and was proud when I did. Slowing down in career is a decision you have to make for yourself, but you should never feel ashamed if you choose to get off of the fast path, if you will, and take something maybe that gives you a different, get you a different outcome for what you need at that time. So hopefully that answered your question. But Abdullah, feel free. We can connect and talk a little more if you want to go into more detail. So, Sean, how does one determine if journey or destination is right for you, if it's okay to change mid-course? So, a couple of things I talked about are ways you might think about it. But I guess you have to step back and assess from a career standpoint, go back to the data, right? So I talked about the fallacy of sunk costs. Just because you've been doing something for 20 years and you're good at it doesn't mean you should keep doing that if that's something that you're not satisfied with. So, what is it that would be different for you? What are you considering as an alternative? Are you worried about finances? Are you worried about stability? Are you worried about your age? Maybe you're like me now and you're in your late 40s and you're wondering, will somebody give me a chance to start different without having to completely start over? I think the reality is think about not what you've already done because those things you should recognize the capabilities and skills you've built and what you like and don't like about the things you're good at, to use that matrix I showed you. But those are all elements that you can now transfer into a different context. So what's that context you're thinking about? Is it starting your own business? Is it changing careers from engineering to sales? Think about what you might consider and what would make you more fulfilled, or if you haven't been able to save, would drive higher income if that's your need, or give you more time because you have an ailing child that you need to spend more time with. Understanding your context and your needs and preferences, that's what will help you answer that question. Again, I think there's a number of tools that I certainly didn't go through today, and I'll advance one slide and kind of show you. This is a list of things, 6 steps in terms of turning setbacks into advantages. So, Abdullah, this was one that might be interesting to you. And I can send this slide to anyone who reaches out to me if you want to email or send me on LinkedIn. The first 90 days, you can go and pull an abstract of it. A grad's guide to getting hired. But what I tell you is that's actually good for anybody. So I wouldn't get caught up in that just being about graduates. This next one talks about conducting a job search, not so much, but a company search. So is a company driven by journey or destination, right? Thinking about that. And then a few other resources related to that. So these might be helpful as you think about, what makes the difference for you as you want to go in and make those changes. So it looks like we have time for maybe one or two more.
Yeah, have time for about one more question.
So Stan, leadership in the organization, working in change, love your job until then. You're able to utilize the strengths fully and joyfully, things to learn all the time. So your job change and the duties were neither your strengths or joys. Yes, that is miserable. So how do you get back to your happy place? So I think, again, how might you think about this? Is it long term? Is this short term? Is this something that is going to be in place essentially on a go forward basis, or is it something temporary that you can help change? There's a great book by David Sanborn called You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader. And I would tell you, any of us can help impact the culture of an organization. And when you have a change like this, change causes, the change curve, which could be an entire other presentation we could go through, is dealing with the despair and despondency of having something change on you. Getting aligned to what the new normal is and finding your way to that happier spot is a process. We all have to go through it. There's a book by Kotter, Kotter, around change management that is a really good resource to help people understand how to deal with those changes and how you can sort of recenter yourself, Stan, about what that might mean and how it looks. So I'm sorry to hear that's a struggle at the moment, but have faith you'll get through, and again, use some of the people you know and the resources available to you, and you'll hopefully come out the other side quickly.
Great. Thank you, Rob, for being able to answer those questions. And uh, if there aren't any more, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all for attending. We have other resources within the UA Career Lab that are available to you. If you just go to alumnicareers.com, you'll be able to find what we have to offer, as well as career webinars. We also do Ask an Expert sessions, which are every third Thursday of the month. from 1 to 2, where you can chime in to get your resume critique, your LinkedIn profile critique, and just ask for career help. So that's another resource to you as well. But we look forward to connecting with each and every one of you offline. We have a survey we'll be sending out. Please be sure to complete it and get it back to us. And once again, thank you, Rob, for doing this presentation. It was very insightful, very helpful. Look forward to working with you in the future. So thank you
I
to everyone.
appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Bear down, everybody. My email, robert.weber@searshc.com, not HS. And on LinkedIn, you can find me. Thank you again. Really enjoyed it. Glad to have participated.